They waited for her to break. The courtiers, the spies, the men who called her the Virgin Queen. Every eye in the room watched her face, searching for a flinch, a tremor, a sign of weakness. Rumors filled the palace like smoke. Plots whispered behind lace curtains. Her enemies didn't attack her with swords. They used words, lies, and silence. And every time they tried to provoke her, she said nothing. For weeks, she let them twist in their own traps. Until one morning, when the same men who mocked her were brought in chains before her throne. No shouting, no revenge, just one quiet look that said everything. Because Queen Elizabeth, I knew something the world still forgets. You don't need to wrestle in the mud to prove your power. You just have to stand so still that everyone else's noise becomes proof of your control. That's the lesson we've lost. The power of silence, the discipline of stillness, and the strength it takes to walk away when your ego screams to fight. Watch till the end, because by the time this video finishes, you'll never look at arguments, drama, or manipulation the same way again. They say you should never wrestle a pig in the mud. You'll both get dirty, and the pig will enjoy it. It sounds simple, almost funny, like a country proverb, but behind it hides one of the most dangerous truths of human behavior. Because the mud isn't just the dirt outside, it's the chaos inside people. It's the place where ego, envy, and insecurity come to feed. And every day, someone is trying to drag you there. At work, it's the coworker who smiles to your face but pokes holes behind your back. Online, it's the stranger who comments just to get a reaction. At home, it's the person who knows exactly which words reopen your oldest wounds. Here's the thing. Not everyone who challenges you is looking for resolution. Some are looking for stimulation. They feed on your reaction. They don't want peace. They want proof that they can control your mood. The trap begins with one simple question that echoes in your head. Are you really going to let them say that to you? And just like that, your ego wakes up. Your heart beats faster. You start building arguments in your mind, sentences sharper than knives. You picture yourself putting them in their place, but in that fantasy, you've already lost. Because you stepped into their arena. The mud belongs to them. A few thousand years ago, Diogenes of Sinope understood this better than anyone. He lived in a barrel, mocked kings, and carried a lamp in daylight, claiming to search for an honest man. When Alexander the Great came to meet him, the most powerful ruler in the world, Diogenes didn't bow. He didn't flatter. He simply said, "Stand out of my sunlight." He could have argued, preached, or tried to impress the emperor. But Diogenes knew the secret. When you argue with someone who lives for attention, you lose twice your peace and your energy. So he didn't wrestle. He simply stood still. That moment became legend. Because power isn't proven in reaction, it's proven in restraint. Still, most of us fall into the trap. We want justice. We want to be right. We want the last word. Think about the last argument you had, maybe with a coworker who twisted your idea, or a friend who turned cold after success. Did you notice how quickly it turned from reason to emotion? How fast your calm became defense? That's the moment the mud grabs your legs. Marcus Licinius Crassus, the richest man in Rome, made the same mistake. He had everything: wealth, influence, and status. But he couldn't stand being overshadowed by Caesar and Pompey. His pride told him, "Prove your greatness on the battlefield." So he went to war against the Parthians, a fight he didn't need. And in that foreign desert, his army drowned in the mud of his own ego. His enemies melted gold and poured it into his mouth, a brutal symbol of dying for greed. History remembers him not for his empire, but for his vanity. Because the man who can't walk away always dies in the mud one way or another. Look around today. The trap hasn't changed, only the arena. Now it's comment sections, office politics, family dinners. People bait you with tone, sarcasm, or silence. They pull the rope just enough to make you react. And when you do, they win. They don't need to be right. They just need to prove they can move you. Ever notice how the loudest person in the room always looks calm once you explode? That's not by accident. They were waiting for it, because anger, once visible, becomes leverage. Queen Elizabeth I mastered this in her court. Surrounded by ambitious men who doubted her, she learned to weaponize silence. When courtiers fought for attention, she simply listened, eyes steady, face unreadable. Weeks later, she'd make a single decision that exposed who had been lying all along. Her restraint wasn't weakness. It was surveillance. She watched others bury themselves in the very mud they thought would trap her. That's how she ruled an empire without raising her voice. Power, real power, doesn't argue. It observes. Here's what most people don't realize. The mud feels familiar. It smells like validation. It gives you that rush of adrenaline. I'm fighting for what's right. But the longer you stay there, the more you become what you despise. Because mud sticks. Every insult you throw, every rumor you chase, it clings to your skin. And one day you look in the mirror and don't recognize yourself. You've become another fighter in the pit, convinced that noise equals strength. The truth? Noise is just the sound of people drowning. I once knew a man who couldn't stop defending himself. Every rumor, every criticism, he answered it. At work, at home, online. He spent years trying to prove he wasn't who they said he was. But the more he fought, the more they dragged him through the mud. Eventually, no one remembered what the original fight was about. They only remembered that he was always fighting. He lost not because he was wrong, but because he couldn't stay silent. He mistook reaction for relevance. Don't make that mistake. When you're baited, pause. Ask yourself, what do they gain if I respond? If the answer is attention, control, or chaos, stay still. Because the greatest act of power is indifference, not coldness, not arrogance, but the deep, calm knowing that you are no longer required to roll in the dirt just to prove you clean. And yet, people will call you arrogant for that silence. They'll say you're afraid. They'll try to poke again. That's fine. Remember, pigs squeal the loudest when they can't get you dirty. You can study psychology, read every book on persuasion, learn every trick in the 48 laws of power, but none of it will save you if your ego still flinches at every insult. Because the mud isn't outside, it's the part of you that still needs to be right. In the next part, we'll go deeper into the ego-s bait, where we'll uncover how people use your need for respect against you, how emotional manipulation works in the smallest interactions, and how to break free from the invisible strings that pull you into conflict. This is where you start learning to walk away not as a coward, but as a king who refuses to crawl. Here's the thing about the mud. It never comes to you as mud. It comes dressed as righteousness, as justice, as the need to defend your honor. That's how the trap works. People don't drag you into chaos. They invite you with bait your ego can't resist. Someone questions your intelligence. Someone mocks your silence. Someone twists your words so carefully that walking away feels like surrender. And suddenly, you're no longer calm. You're no longer observing. You're defending. That's how every great downfall begins, not with failure, but with offense. Let's talk about Otto von Bismarck, the Iron Chancellor. He built the German Empire not through war, but through psychological warfare, patience, silence, and well-timed manipulation. He once said, "Never destroy your enemies too quickly. Sometimes you need them alive to scare others. That's not cruelty. That's clarity." He understood that when your ego reacts to every insult, you become predictable. Predictable people are controllable, and controllable people never hold power for long. Bismarck baited his rivals into arrogance, let them talk themselves into corners. And when they overplayed their hand, he moved one quiet piece on the board and ended the game. While others shouted, he waited. While others tried to win, he focused on endurance. That's the art of staying out of the mud, not just silence, but strategic silence. Most people don't realize this. Ego is the cheapest leash ever invented. You don't need to trap people with cages when you can trap them with validation. In the modern world, that leash looks like a comment online that says, "You're all talk." A coworker whispering, "You wouldn't last a day without me." A partner sighing, "You've changed." They're not random words. They're baited hooks designed to make you prove yourself. And once you take the bait, the leash tightens. You don't even notice it, because proving yourself feels like control. But in truth, it's the purest form of submission. Here's a simple example. Two coworkers, equally talented. One keeps getting promoted, the other feels invisible. So one day, the jealous one plants a seed, a rumor that the other's success is all favoritism. What happens? The accused starts explaining himself to everyone. He writes long emails justifying his work. He starts talking more, producing less. In trying to prove he's clean, he walks right into the mud. And the jealous one? They stand back, arms folded, smiling. They've won not the job, not the respect, but control over another person's peace. That's ego's bait at work. Miyamoto Musashi warned against this centuries ago. He said the greatest victory is not in striking your opponent, but in not being moved by him. Musashi fought 60 duels and never lost, not because he was faster, but because he never let rage lead his hand. He once delayed a duel intentionally, arriving hours late just to make his rival furious and reckless. His opponent came charging through the sand, blind with anger, and Musashi ended the fight in a single stroke. No emotion, no noise, no mud. He understood something we forget when someone tries to provoke you. They're not fighting you, they're fighting for your attention. And attention is energy. If you can't control it, someone else will. Ego makes you forget that silence is a weapon too, because when you stop reacting, manipulators panic. They depend on your predictability, your anger, your explanations, your apologies. Take that away, and their whole game collapses. They'll accuse you of being distant. They'll call you cold. They'll even play the victim. But stay still long enough, and you'll watch their performance unravel. Because ego can fake many things. Confidence, kindness, intelligence, but not consistency. Only truth can survive silence. Let's take a modern example. Elon Musk. Love him or hate him, the man has mastered psychological judo. He doesn't fight criticism head-on, he amplifies it. He lets his haters advertise for him. Every insult becomes oxygen for his narrative. He once tweeted, "Please, keep attacking me on social media. It increases engagement." It wasn't arrogance, it was asymmetrical warfare. While critics wrestled in the mud, he built rockets, cars, and attention economies. Because he knew, the one who controls the spotlight controls the story. But here's the paradox. Even knowing this, your ego still whispers, but this time it's different. It tells you, this one deserves an answer. That whisper is the bait's final form. So how do you break it? Start by naming it. When you feel that pull to respond, pause and say, that's my ego wanting to prove itself again. It sounds small, but it's a reset button for your entire nervous system. It reminds you that you're not the emotion. You're the awareness behind it. Because people who can name their triggers never fall into them. There's a story about Serena Williams. During a high-stakes match, her opponent mocked her movements. The crowd booed, the pressure was unbearable, but she didn't react, not then. She kept her composure, focused on her rhythm, her breath. And when she won, she walked off with no celebration, no gloating, just presence. Later, she said, "If I reacted to every insult, I'd never have energy left to win." That's mastery turning restraint into fuel. The ego wants to win arguments. The wise want to win awareness. That's the difference between reaction and evolution. The ego says, they disrespected me. The mind says, they're projecting their pain. The soul says, not every fire needs my oxygen. Once you reach that level of clarity, you don't just avoid the mud, you stop seeing it as mud. You see it as noise. And noise loses power when you stop dancing to it. The bait only works on the hungry. An ego is hunger for validation, for control, for recognition. But you're learning to fast, to stay empty, still, powerful, because the one who can't be baited becomes untouchable. In the next part, The Anatomy of the Mud, we all dissect what's really happening underneath all this, why people need to provoke, why attention feels like oxygen to the weak, and how the human mind disguises insecurity as righteousness. We'll break down the invisible mechanics of manipulation and why the only way to win some wars is not to fight them at all. Let's peel back the layers now. Because the mud, it's not random. It's not just chaos. It's designed. There's a psychology to it. Every fight, every argument, every emotional trap, it follows patterns as old as civilization itself. See, the mud is not a place. It's a state of mind. It's where people go when they no longer want truth, They just want to feel powerful. And the easiest way to feel powerful is to make someone else lose control. That's the real game. The goal was never to defeat you. It was to contaminate you. Let's break it down. At its core, the mud is made of 3 elements: projection, insecurity, and dependency. Projection. People throw their own inner dirt at you, hoping it'll stick so they don't have to face it. When someone calls you selfish, manipulative, lazy, often it's not about you. It's a mirror they can't look into, so they use your face instead. It's psychological camouflage. That's why the calmest people attract the loudest critics. Your composure reminds them of what they lack. Your confidence makes them itch. Your peace exposes their storm. They can't sit with that discomfort, so they throw it. And if you react, they get relief. Because now, the pain isn't just inside them, it's shared. That's projection. Insecurity. Now, insecurity is the mud's glue. It's what makes people need to win arguments that don't matter. It's what keeps them scrolling through comments, looking for someone to insult. It's what makes a manager humiliate an employee just to feel important. The insecure can't rise, so they drag. They can't shine, so they dim others. And the easiest way to lower someone's light is to splash mud on it. Dependency. Then comes dependency, the craving for emotional engagement. Ever notice how some people thrive on drama? It's not that they enjoy pain, they enjoy reaction. It gives them life. Silence feels like death to them. It's like a child throwing tantrums just to be noticed. Except now the tantrum wears a suit, sits in meetings, or posts under your videos. These are emotional parasites. They feed on attention, and your reaction is their meal. That's why silence kills them faster than any insult ever could. Centuries ago, Niccolò Machiavelli warned of this. He said, "Men should either be treated generously or destroyed because they take revenge for small injuries but cannot respond to great ones." What he meant was simple. When you stay above their level, they can't reach you. They will scream, accuse, gossip, but they can't touch you. Because mud only sticks when you kneel. That's why the greatest power move is indifference. It confuses the insecure. It starves the dependent. And it silences the projecting. But there's something darker hiding in all this. A truth people don't want to face. Sometimes, you are the one standing in the mud. Not because you're evil, but because you've been conditioned to react. From childhood, we're trained to defend ourselves. Don't let anyone disrespect you. Speak up for yourself. Fight back. It sounds noble, but what it really creates is emotional fragility. You grow up believing every insult deserves a response. That silence equals weakness. That calm means surrender. So when someone pushes your buttons, you react instantly. You think you're protecting your dignity, but what you're really protecting is your ego's addiction to control. Here's a story you probably haven't heard. In ancient Japan, there was a monk named Takuan Soho, a mentor to samurai, including Musashi himself. He taught warriors how to fight without anger. Once, a samurai asked him, "How do I face an opponent who insults me before battle?" Takuan said, "Imagine he's throwing a burning coal at you. If you catch it, you get burned. If you let it fall, the fire dies." That's psychology in its purest form. The mud only burns if you hold it. In today's world, the mud has gone digital. Social media is the biggest pit ever built. Millions of people flinging projection, insecurity, and dependency at each other every second. People spend hours defending themselves to strangers they'll never meet. They don't realize the fight isn't about truth, it's about dopamine. Every reply, every notification, every argument gives a small hit of chemical validation. It's not about winning, it's about feeling alive. The mud gives them that feeling even if it ruins them. Let me tell you something uncomfortable. The algorithm isn't your enemy. It just mirrors human nature. It rewards what people already crave: conflict, outrage, and emotional noise. That's why silence feels invisible online. But here's the paradox. In the real world, silence is where your power multiplies. It's where respect grows. It's where the wise retreat to sharpen their mind. The world worships noise because noise distracts from pain. But truth is quiet. Let's take this deeper. Why do people need the mud so badly? because mud equalizes. When they can't reach your level, pulling you down feels like victory. It's the only way the powerless feel power. You've seen it before. A lazy coworker criticizes your work ethic. A bitter friend mocks your ambition. A failed leader attacks your ideas. It's not coincidence, it's math. For them to rise, you must fall, but only if you agree to step down into the pit. There's a haunting example from history. Marcus Licinius Crassus again. He wasn't dragged by others this time. He dragged himself. He had everything but wanted more, not wealth, but respect. He couldn't handle being underestimated, and that's all it took. The mud doesn't care how strong you are. It just needs one weakness: pride. He crossed deserts to fight a war that wasn't his. He sought glory. He found humiliation. The mud of his ego swallowed the empire he could have ruled from peace. The lesson? When you chase validation, you chase your own destruction. Psychologically, the mud is attractive because it gives a temporary sense of identity. When you're angry, you feel clear. When you're fighting, you feel alive. When you're insulted, you feel important. That's why some people never stop fighting, because peace feels like emptiness. But real strength begins where noise ends, because the man who can sit in silence, surrounded by provocation, is no longer controlled by the world he's mastered himself. The mud is the test, not to show who's smarter, but to reveal who's sovereign. So next time someone provokes you, remember, they're not attacking your truth, they're fishing for your peace. And peace is the most valuable thing you own. Don't trade it for validation. Don't barter it for revenge. Don't sell it to ego. In the next part, The Art of Stillness, we'll go from understanding the mud to mastering it. We'll explore how silence, patience, and psychological detachment become weapons sharper than words. We'll see how warriors, rulers, and even modern leaders learn to turn stillness into dominance, and how you can do the same. Because once you learn not to step into the mud, the world stops being your battlefield and becomes your chessboard. Stillness. People mistake it for weakness. They think silence means surrender. But stillness is not the absence of movement, it's the mastery of direction. Anyone can shout. Anyone can react. But to stay calm when provoked, to stay centered when the storm rages, that's power few ever earn. Because stillness isn't born in peace, it's forged in chaos. Let me paint a scene for you. A battlefield not of swords but of minds. Soldiers panicking, smoke rising, orders clashing, and in the middle stands a general unmoved. He doesn't bark commands, he watches, he calculates. Every heartbeat, every scream, every shadow becomes part of his map. While others burn energy, he builds clarity. When he finally speaks, the whole army listens, because real authority doesn't shout, it resonates. That's the art of stillness, and few embodied it like Bismarck, the Iron Chancellor. He once said, "The secret of politics, wait for the right moment." While his rivals plotted and attacked, he waited. He allowed their impatience to expose them. He used time as a weapon, silence as his camouflage. It wasn't passivity, it was precision. Stillness is not doing nothing. It's doing only what matters. In life, most people confuse motion with progress. They argue, they chase, they defend, they think noise equals power. But in truth, motion without intention is the same as drowning. Stillness, on the other hand, is awareness in motion. It's knowing when to act and when to hold back. It's refusing to swing until the hit is fatal. Miyamoto Musashi wrote about this too. He said the greatest warrior wins with a single cut, not because of speed, but because of patience. He trained his mind to see openings others missed, and that required stillness not of body, but of mind. When you can be still inside, chaos outside loses meaning. But here's the truth. Stillness feels unnatural at first, because we've been conditioned to do something every time we're uncomfortable. We reply, we defend, we argue, we over-explain. Silence feels like defeat, but that's the illusion. Stillness doesn't mean you stop speaking. It means you stop bleeding energy into things that don't deserve it. Let's look at Queen Elizabeth I again. She faced assassination plots, betrayal, wars, and endless attempts to dethrone her. Yet her greatest victories came not from armies but from silence. When her advisors pressured her to marry for political gain, she smiled and said nothing. She let the world speculate. Her silence became mystery, and mystery became control. Because when you reveal less, people imagine more, and imagination is a more powerful tool than explanation. That's why stillness is feared, not because it's weak, but because it makes others uncomfortable. They can't read you. They can't manipulate you. They can't predict your next move. And in that uncertainty, they lose balance. That's dominance without lifting a finger. Now think about modern life. Meetings, notifications, conflicts, constant noise. People rush to respond. Everyone's defending something, their reputation, their pride, their image. And in that endless motion, no one's thinking, they're just reacting. But stillness creates space for clarity, space for truth, space for power. That's why the calm person in a chaotic room always seems intimidating. They're not louder, not stronger, just still. While everyone else is enslaved to impulse, they are free. Diogenes of Sinope, the philosopher who mocked kings, understood this perfectly. He once sat eating in the marketplace, something considered shameful in his time. When people laughed at him, he said, "If I can eat when I'm hungry and sleep when I'm tired, I am freer than you." He wasn't trying to provoke. He was simply unshakable. Because true stillness comes from needing nothing from anyone, and that's the highest form of psychological independence the day you stop needing validation to exist. But let's get real. Stillness isn't glamorous. It's lonely. It's misunderstood. You'll lose people who mistake your calm for apathy. They'll call you emotionless, detached, even arrogant. Let them. Because every person who misunderstands your peace was feeding on your chaos. Once you stop giving them reaction, they disappear. And that's not loss, it's cleansing. There's a story from modern history, Angela Merkel, during the 2008 global financial crisis. Every leader was panicking, markets collapsing, countries shouting. She sat through meetings saying almost nothing. Reporters mocked her as indecisive, but she was gathering data, studying behavior. When she finally acted calmly, precisely her decisions stabilized an entire continent. That's the quiet force of stillness. She didn't need to be loud. She needed to be right. Stillness isn't about being passive. It's about timing. When emotion moves, it creates waves. When awareness moves, it creates impact. Learn the difference. That's why the world's greatest minds, from stoics to samurai, from emperors to entrepreneurs, share one thing in common. They act from calm, not chaos. They don't chase control. They embody it. You see it in the way Serena Williams breathes between points. You see it in how Elon Musk absorbs criticism like oxygen. You see it in how Marcus Aurelius, in his meditations, wrote not of triumph, but of restraint. Stillness is not just a skill, it's a shield. When you master it, arguments become background noise. You no longer chase understanding, you radiate it. You stop being a player in the mud and become the mirror above it. Because stillness doesn't fight shadows, it turns on the light. But make no mistake, stillness takes courage. It takes a kind of internal strength most people never build, because to stay still when provoked, you must face the noise inside you. You must see your own ego, your own impatience, your own fear of invisibility, and not move. That's where growth happens. Not in victory, but in pause. Not in reaction, but in restraint. Stillness is self-confrontation disguised as calm. When you start practicing it, you'll feel resistance. The mind will scream. Say something. Do something. Prove something. Ignore it. Sit with it. That's the mud trying to pull you back. Don't fight it. Just breathe. Let it sink without you. Because you don't win by escaping the mud, you win by becoming untouchable by it. In the final section, the return to power, will bring it all together. We'll explore how you rise from the mud with authority, how to turn restraint into dominance, and how to reclaim your energy so completely that even chaos begins to serve you. Because real mastery isn't avoiding the mud, it's realizing you were never meant to step down there in the first place. When you stop wrestling in the mud, something strange happens. At first, the world goes quiet. People who used to provoke you fall away. The noise you thought was everywhere vanishes. And for a moment, it feels empty. But that emptiness isn't loneliness. It's space. It's where power returns. We spend most of our lives reacting, defending, proving, explaining. It becomes our second skin. But when you finally stop, when you choose not to step into the fight, you realize something profound. They never had power over you. You just kept giving it away. Every argument you joined, every rumor you answered, every apology you forced out just to keep peace, that was energy leaking out of you drop by drop. And now you're taking it back. This is what self-mastery really looks like. It's not about dominance, it's about direction. It's turning inward, reclaiming everything you scattered while chasing validation. You start noticing patterns in yourself, in others. You see how easily people get baited, how quickly they defend, how loudly they justify. And you don't feel superior. You just feel free. That's the first sign of awakening when you no longer need to win. Let me tell you a story. In the 1600s, a Japanese general named Uesugi Kenshin faced a rival lord who kept sending him insults, mocking his faith, questioning his honor. Every messenger expected war, but Kenshin never replied. He simply sent back gifts: rice, salt, tea. When asked why, he said, "Why should I let another man's anger dictate my generosity?" Years later, when famine struck the rival's lands, it was Kenshin's supplies that kept them alive. He became legend not because he conquered enemies, but because he conquered himself. That's power. Not the kind that rules people, the kind that rules your own reactions. Modern life gives you daily versions of this same test. Your coworker takes credit for your work. Your friend mocks your dreams. A stranger online insults you for no reason. Each moment whispers, "React." But every time you don't, you grow. Every time you stay calm, you rise a little higher above the mud. Because walking away isn't weakness, it's withdrawal of oxygen. It's the most surgical strike you can deliver, cutting off what feeds on you without ever raising a hand. Stillness becomes your strategy. Silence becomes your statement. Peace becomes your weapon. The person who can't be provoked is the person who can't be controlled. That's the end game of all psychological power, freedom from emotional slavery. And once you taste it, you'll never crave argument again. But to reach that level, you must confront the part of you that likes the fight. Because if you're honest, a piece of you enjoys the adrenaline, the drama, the righteous heat of battle. That's the ego's last trick. It convinces you that chaos means passion, that calm means boredom. It's a lie. Real passion burns quietly. It doesn't scream. It builds. Ask any craftsman, any athlete, any philosopher. Mastery isn't fireworks. It's focus. Take Serena Williams, for instance. She built her career not by overpowering others, but by mastering her inner tempo. Her greatest rival was never across the net. It was inside her head. When she learned to quiet that storm, victory followed naturally. Because success is never the reward of control, it is control. In business, the same truth applies. The CEO who reacts emotionally loses millions. The investor who panics sells early. The leader who seeks revenge burns credibility. But the one who stays centered, who moves with precision and patience, eventually commands not just outcomes, but people's trust. Elon Musk understands this paradox better than most. Every insult, every controversy, he turns it into energy. He doesn't hide from chaos, he redirects it. He lets noise amplify his presence while he keeps building in silence. That's power to use the storm without drowning in it. You can do the same, not on Twitter, not in boardrooms, but in your own life. At home, at work, in friendships. Start by noticing the triggers. Who makes you lose calm? Whose approval do you chase? Whose opinion changes your energy? Then do something radical. Stop reacting. Not for a day, for a week. Let the silence speak for you. Watch how the manipulators panic. Watch how the gossip fades. Watch how suddenly your time feels richer, your thoughts clearer, your confidence quieter but heavier. That's the feeling of returning to power. Here's a truth most people never learn. When you stop reacting, you don't become smaller, you become unreachable. And the unreachable are always misunderstood. Let them misunderstand you. Clarity doesn't require audience approval, because the world doesn't reward the loudest, it rewards the most consistent. And consistency comes only from calm. Even Diogenes, the mad philosopher who mocked society, wasn't driven by chaos, he was driven by peace. He rejected comfort to stay free from control. He lived simply so no one could bribe him with luxury or threaten him with loss. His stillness wasn't the absence of desire, it was the presence of truth. He didn't need to win arguments. He was the argument. That's what walking away really means. You stop participating in systems designed to drain you. You stop being entertainment for the emotionally hungry, and that's when the mud dries beneath your feet. Let's bring it closer to you. Imagine every argument you didn't start, every insult you didn't answer, every moment you paused instead of reacting. Each of those was a quiet victory. They don't make noise, they don't trend, but they build something louder than applause, inner authority. And the people who carry that authority move differently. They don't chase. They attract. They don't defend. They define. They're not fighting for peace. They are peace. Here's the irony. Once you reach that place, you stop wanting revenge. Because you realize revenge requires attention. And you no longer give that out for free. You just move. Quietly. Decisively. Every insult becomes proof of your distance. Every rumor becomes background noise, and every loss becomes training for the next level of calm. That's transformation. That's awakening. You begin to understand that power was never about domination. It was about direction of energy. And all your life, that energy was scattered through fear, anger, defensiveness. Now it flows inward, sharp, contained, alive. You become dangerous not because you fight, but because you could and don't. That's what the masters knew. That's what Musashi, Bismarck, Elizabeth, Diogenes all practiced in different forms. Control not of the world, but of the self. Because whoever controls themselves controls outcomes. And that's where we end, not in noise, not in victory chants, but in silence. A silence filled with power, not emptiness. Because silence is where everything begins again. So next time someone tries to drag you into the mud, smile. Let them roll. You've got higher ground now. Because when you stop wrestling pigs, you don't just stay clean, you learn to walk on water. They said she was cold. They said she was emotionless. But in truth, she was unshakable. Because Queen Elizabeth understood the secret that destroys most people. Your reaction is your crown. The moment you let someone steal your calm, you've handed them your throne. She didn't need to shout to prove authority. She didn't need to fight to show strength. She ruled by doing what the world fears most, nothing. Stillness. That was her weapon, and silence her armor. That's what true mastery looks like. Not revenge, not argument, control. And maybe that's your lesson too. To stop wrestling in the mud, to stop letting small people pull you into small battles, because your peace is your kingdom, and not everyone deserves to stand in it. So the next time someone tries to provoke you, remember the queen. Remember her silence. Remember that calm is not weakness, it's dominion. Walk away, not because you're afraid to fight, but because you've already won. Never wrestle in the mud with those who need it to feel alive. You were made to rule above it.